All right. I'm Deb Hay. I'm the new principal here. Been here since July, and I'll introduce the admin team that's on the screen with us tonight. I have Jessica Easthope, one of our assistant principals.
Hello.
I
Thank
have
you for being here.
Bernie Newell, another assistant principal. And then Crystal Alleman, one of our assistant principals.
Hi there.
So again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. The hope is that we're able to share with you and have you gain some common understanding of our work in this building this year around equitable grading practices and the commitments we've made as a staff, in connection to the work that we did this summer with our leadership improvement team, which we call LIT. It's in a traditional sense, kind of like your department chairs, in connection to our secondary schools, that is then in connection to our district strategic plan. So as information is gathered from different community members and from families, one of the large messages that came out from some of that conversation was having common grading practices or common grade books, things like that across our secondary schools. And so some of what you're going to hear tonight is coming out of that. And then some of what you're going to hear tonight is the work that we individually did here in our building. We started, like I said, this work with our learning improvement team, our department chairs, in August, and then carried that through to our staff in late August when we had our professional development days. And then we've had first quarter now to live in this work. We will do a problem of practice in our second prep Tuesdays, where we meet with teachers. We talk through different challenges, different things that come up, so that we can help problem solve together and be part of the team and working through that. We do have a document that is on our website. We are working currently on getting an academic tab to our website so different items can live there. Staff were asked to take this information and put this on their Schoology page and have in their syllabus that we will reference later. We then did in September at our curriculum night, I did a 30,000-foot view with a presentation around some of the vocabulary that lives under this umbrella. And then we posted that to our website and shared that on Parent Square. So we will speak tonight through some vocabulary. What do the consistent grading commitments mean? And then it'll be a shared presentation among us. And then we'll have time at the end for questions. All right, so content team consistency. What do we mean by that? When you are, for example, I've picked on English 10 for every presentation we've done. For you, for example, say that you have a student that's in English 10 and they have a friend, and then there's a summer barbecue or there's a dinner to go to, and both families have a student in English 10, but they have a different teacher. The content team is the English 10 team, and the hope is that there will be consistency among those teachers. That was one of the pieces of feedback that we received, is students were getting different learning depending on the teacher they had. And when you're talking about a system our size and a school our size, there needs to be consistency across same named courses, is how we would call that. I just used English 10 as the example. So what was asked of us at the district level was to ensure that if you had a class that had the same name, they were using the same syllabus, the same grade weights, and the same categories. So those components would be the same and would look the same regardless of who your teacher was. They would also then be talking and working together with the same summative and or benchmark assessments. Our work that we do with our instructional coaches around our school improvement plan, there are benchmarks assessments embedded within our work. And then the goal is at their early release Fridays, when they're working together on our building directed time, those collaborative teams are working through the conversation around these benchmark assessments. Where we have a different phrase, similar versus the same, is the expectation and agreement was they would have similar opportunities for learning. So what that doesn't mean is that on Tuesday of this week, all English 10 classes were doing this. It means that they were doing things that were similar throughout that unit time period, so that at the end of a unit, students were measured with the same standards and being able to show their learning. They just may not be in the exact same project in the exact same way, but they definitely are similar in size and similar in amount. And then the other piece that was expected of us in the district process was a weekly grade update or communication to students and families. And so what we implemented was that our success coordinator, Jordan Savage, would communicate to our teachers as a reminder, because we don't have an automatic process between Schoology and Skyward. And Ms. Lallemand going to speak to that here in a little bit. And so they're expected to manually sync between Schoology and Skyward if they grade in both, so that the final most up-to-date grade is in Skyward every Friday. And if they have nothing to update, then they're doing a communication out to their families to say, this is what we worked on this week. So that provides where we have the consistency and similar and same across our building with all teachers. Move to the next slide. Then I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Lallemand so that she can talk to other layers of the vocabulary and other layers of the learning.
Thank you. So one thing that we needed to do before we embarked on this journey together was to really hone in on what a grade means and to define a grade. So for those of you who may not be as into education as we all are, our standards are given to us by the state, and those standards represent what a student should know and be able to do when they come out of any given course. For example, Algebra 1 has a certain set of standards that all students should be able to do at the end of the course, and the grade for that course should be representative of their individual progress towards those learning standards. One thing that we were very clear with our teachers about, and our teachers are also very clear about, there was really no question about it, is that grades are not a reward or a punishment. So a student turning something in late should never be penalized, because that's just part of a behavior versus part of a grade. We do have some pretty clear and consistent deadlines, which I'll talk about, but in terms of like the idea that if you turn in an essay 2 days late, it's docked 10%, and 4 days late is 20%. We don't do that kind of thing anymore. Other things that are considered behaviors and are not supposed to be a part of the grade are things like participation, effort, showing up to class on time, those kinds of things. Next slide. Another thing we did is we really took a look at our 100-point scale. If you think about a 100-point grading scale, each letter grade at the top, the A, the B, the C, are each made up of only 10 points. When you get down to the F, that F is made up of 59 points. So there's a much higher proportion of the points that make up the F letter grade than make up the rest of the letter grades. For that reason, a student that's consistently struggling in class or not turning things in, accumulating a lot of zeros, can dig themselves into a hole pretty quickly. So we have asked our teachers to bottom out their grading scale at a 50. An F is an F. It means you fail, no matter if it's a 50 or if it's a 30. So we've asked them to make 50 the bottom floor for those grades. At the end of a course, a student can't choose to just take 50s. So if they don't take the assessments, initially they will get that 50%. So suppose I'm a student that got 100% on the first couple of assessments, and I decide to kick my feet up and hang out and just get 50s for the rest. I won't get a grade for the course. I'll end up failing, because a student needs to demonstrate that they have attempted all assessments to earn a grade in a course. Another thing we've done building-wide is to differentiate between unit deadlines that are established by our content team. So those are the deadlines that typically happen at the unit test or at the very end of a unit, where all the assignments leading up to that assessment, that's the last day that they can turn them in. So they all have due dates along the way. And really, if we're encouraging our students to be learning, they should be keeping up with those assignments and keeping up with those due dates. But we understand that things happen. They have 7 classes. And so we wanted to give a little buffer for getting those assignments turned in. And then the second deadline we have are our quarter deadlines. And these happen at the end of each quarter. They are school-wide deadlines. And that is the last day to complete any assessments or to do any reassessments for any of the units within that quarter. Some of those are kind of flexible. If a unit falls, over that quarter deadline, the teachers will let the students know that can be pushed to the next quarter. We've also taken our second quarter deadline and our fourth quarter deadline and given a 2-week buffer before the end of the semester, just in case students are absent or need to work one-on-one with their teachers to make sure that they have all their assessments done. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Newell, who is going to talk about reassessment.
Thank you. As you heard Ms. Hay speak about, in our efforts to have that collective commitment towards consistency, our common courses or same name courses developed what we call as an earned reassessment policy. Reassessment policy may be tailored specific to a department wide, like for example, world language has a department-wide reassessment policy, whereas it also may be specific to a grade level team or content. Like our LA9 has a specific reassessment policy that may be different than the LA12. The goal with our reassessment policy is primarily intended for a student to have another opportunity to demonstrate what he or she knows and can do, but also as a means for that student to then build upon that progression of their learning. There are three types of reassessments that our teachers have designed. So one of them, as it reads there, is where a teacher may allow a student to reassess an initial assessment and then replace that grade. Corrections or rewrites also fall into this category. So when you're looking at social studies primarily or language arts, as there may be a lot of assessments that are written reassessments, they may also fall into this category. Our second category is where a teacher allows a student to reassess on a similar but maybe not identical assessment, still covering the same skills or standards. So it's a reassessment on the skills or standards, but that reassessment may look differently on how it's given to a student in which they are asked to then demonstrate their knowledge or demonstrate what they can do in a different manner. The third category or the third type is where the teacher may place the same content on an upcoming assessment and replaces that initial grade as is maybe appropriate to that skill or standard. Math department's a great example of that with their PCs and their CPCs, where a higher grade may replace any lower grade as that progression learning follows through that particular unit. So, and again, in essence, these were our work towards having some consistency and commonality throughout the school that supports our grading for equity. Again, it is designed particular to that either department or that same like course or grade level content. Now, on that, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Lallman, who's going to talk more about Schoology and Skyward.
Thank you. We do have two systems that our students have to navigate between and that we're asking our parents to navigate between. Schoology is our learning management system, and then Skyward is our data management system. So in Schoology, that's where you're going to find things, all things that pertain to learning. So daily agendas for the class, the calendar of upcoming assessments and assignments, copies of teacher lecture notes, assignments with directions, resources and links. All of those things live inside of Schoology. So when you're thinking about your student being here in class every day and how they manage their learning and organize their thinking, Schoology is the place to be. While some of our teachers still put grades into the Schoology gradebook, the Schoology gradebook will not give you a cumulative grade. For that, you need to go to Skyward. Skyward is the official data management system that communicates with all of the state systems. It is where the final grades will be pulled to go onto the academic transcript. It is where our students will go in and input their courses for course registration, and it's where all our official records live. So anything like attendance, accurate grades, all of those things live in Skyward. This is an example of what you'd see if you logged into a Schoology gradebook. As you can see on the left, it's a little blurry, but there are folders that have all of the resources for the course. Over on the right, you can see that part where it says upcoming, and that's the calendar of upcoming assignments and things that are going on in class. And then in Skyward, you will get this menu. You can do a lot of things in Skyward. You can put money on your students' food service account. You can look at their test scores and their education milestones. It's also where they can track their graduation requirements to make sure they're on track for graduation. And like I said before, while some teachers still grade in Schoology, all teachers are required to sync those grades to Skyward. And Skyward is where the official grades, like any given moment, that should be the most up-to-date picture of your student's grade. So we encourage you to go there to look for grade updates.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for the work and the conversation. I really appreciate it. We also wanted to take an opportunity to share with you the departments that we support directly, and that if any questions come up in regards to those departments, then you can reach out to us. individually or a teacher within that department. We always encourage that you go directly to the teacher first. If you have attempted and worked through that and it's not resolved the way you were hoping, then connecting with us, connecting with a counselor is a really good idea. You can also see here that the three assistant principals also have student last name by alpha, and that's for partnering with our counselors on our MTSS tiered system of support, as well as disciplinary responses as needed. A student can obviously see any one of the administrators, and yet we do have this for a systematic purpose. The last person you see there is Michelle Cheney, our CTE director, who in our building gets to have an office here in our building, which is not typical, which is exciting that we get to have her here and as part of our team. And then she directly supports and evaluates the CTE teachers. So welcome to take a screenshot of that so that you have it. But again, we're the point person. If you get to one of us and we're not the point person for that department, we will always loop in the administrator and then go from there. So thank you and appreciate that. So that ends our specific presentation, and we want to have the last 10 minutes of our time tonight to answer questions in our Q&A. Jessica Easthope is the moderator on the back end looking at those questions. I will read them out loud, and then depending on the question and the topic, I will either answer it or I'll provide the opportunity for other administrators to answer. Looks like we have a question. Okay, so our first question is, what if a child has an accommodation to allow extra time on assignments? Do they get an extension on the unit ending deadline? So yes, if a student has an accommodation, they're in partnership with the case manager, or if it's a 504 accommodation and the teacher, and then they create that specific individual plan to the allowing for extra time. So while it may say allow for extra time, that 504 team or that IEP team determines what allowing for extra time means. There is time allotted for extra time within those unit deadlines and the quarter deadline that can meet the expectation of the accommodation. But if there's something outside of that individually for the student and their disability, then we work with the family and the team on that. The second question we have is, what would be your school's philosophy on timed tests given in a department and how that relates to grading for equity? Ms. Solomon, you took this one on one of our first questions on our first sessions.
Yeah, so with time tests, typically speaking, our tests are designed to be taken in the amount of time a class period offers. So I don't think there's any specific place in our building where, unless it's an AP course where kids need to get used to a timeline, because that is a function of the AP test that we have to prepare our students to tackle. Other than that, I don't think that there are any specific places where time limits are being placed on tests. I know specifically in the math department, that is a concern that I hear frequently. But I can tell you that if students are prepared for the tests, and most of them are, that the amount of time the students are given to take those assessments is adequate for the most part. Now, we do have students that need extended time and that need that extra time. Working with their teacher to take one, like the front page of the test today and the back page another time, that's an option. We also have an assessment center that we've started in our building where students can go and get additional time as needed. They just need to talk with their teacher about that and advocate for their needs.
The question is, do you have criteria for measuring the success of the quarterly deadline? So the answer to that would be, this is our first quarter in our first year doing this. What I can tell you, as we were working through the process of adjusting our athletic status for grades, we adjusted from a 1 week cycle to a 3-week cycle. So a student would be on probation for 3 weeks so that they would have time to complete and do reassessments through that unit cycle. And we saw no difference of amplification of grades in a less Fs or more A's. And so when we worked with staff on this, the question was, when it was time for our second round of grade review, was there any more students than we'd had previously? And the answer was no. So that's our one piece of data point that we have, and we will review grades as we go. The quarterly deadline also provides an opportunity for showing students that there does get to be a deadline within a grading period, and provided the space to say that we don't want you waiting for the entire semester. That's not realistic. It's not realistic in any real world opportunity. Now, it's not realistic that it would be a daily deadline, but it also is unrealistic that it would go for an entire 90 days. So that's where the rationale and what the research talked about for us that we read. Yeah. So thank you for your question. Appreciate it. So the question is, I've heard part of this initiative is to make tests weighted at 90% and homework at 10%. Can you clarify this? So this is the work, and then Krista, I'll let you answer. This is the work that we asked collaborative teams to look at. Most of our departments were already doing the assessment heavy weight in their grade books. That is not new. It's just being better articulated, and more communication has gone out about it. But I will let Krista speak to a department that she oversees in which that 90-10 split has happened.
So it's been that way for our upper level math classes and our science classes for some time now. And I know that it feels very assessment heavy and it feels very test heavy. And the reason behind that is we want that grade to be truly representative of what a student can know and do and demonstrate independently of their peers. What the research tells us is that homework is a super inequitable practice, that kids can copy homework, that sometimes students are not able to put the amount of effort into homework that their peers are. And so we want the majority of that learning to be happening during class. That being said, with that 90% test weight, our teachers are consistently every single day assessing students for where they are in progress towards that learning. So very, very infrequently, I would say, are students tested before they're ready. They have a lot of measures within class, exit tickets and entry tests and all kinds of things that they're constantly looking at to make sure that students are ready before they hit that assessment. Another thing that we have talked a lot about in these sessions is like thinking about this as grading for learning versus grading for equity. So instilling in our students those habits that are going to make them successful in the long run. So knowing the exact things that I need to practice so that I can perform on that assessment. And that's going to be different and individualized for every student.
I just wanted to add to that and just say that the 90-10 weight is not a universal weight. Each of our like content courses needed to have developed those weights themselves. And so, for example, I wanted to give you guys is that biology is currently at a 25-75, 25 of building knowledge, 75 of demonstrating knowledge. Physical science is at 1585. And then chemistry is at 1090. So the 90-10 isn't a universal weight across all subject areas, all like content courses, but it was each of the content specific courses to have them be the same within their own like kind course.
So thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and close out now as we finish out our evening. So appreciate you. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. So have a good evening, and we will go ahead and stop recording.